I still need my toothbrush.
I'm telling you guys, this toothbrush, it's gonna be the key to it all. True Detective Night Country episode 2 has given us a lot to chew on. I'm sorry. So let's break everything down and then I'll wrap it all up with my thoughts and theories. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episode breakdowns and to help us get to the top of this chart. Let's get started. The episode opens back at the crime scene on the 4th day of night where Liz and Peter are analyzing the Corpsicle of the Salal research team when Peter asks if the investigation will be pushed off to the Anchorage police and Liz says, nah, we're keeping it. Observing from afar, Rose tells Navarro to leave this one for someone else. Navarro says she can't because it's tied to Annie's case, to which Rose says, oh, then you're screwed, and then tells Navarro to come see her later. Navarro turns to leave and she kicks something on the ground, which turns out to be the folded clothes of the Salal team. Back at the Corpsicle, one of the cops accidentally snaps off a frozen arm and one of the twisted up dead guys starts shouting. Wait a minute. Twist and shout? Interesting. Now, I think this character is Anders Lund based on the events that happen throughout this episode, but they actually never tell us who this guy is. That said, as I'll go over later in the video, it doesn't take too much detective work to figure out that this is Anders. Also, this scene gave me more flashbacks to The Thing, in particular this famous scene with the spider head thing on the ceiling, and with the Easter egg we saw in episode 1, I feel like this is yet another nod to the classic horror icon. After the intro, Liz visits Ennis High School, and as she's walking through the hall, she's on a call with a nurse discussing someone going into surgery who will have to have their leg amputated. Of course, I believe this to be Anders Lund, but they never tell us in this episode. It's kind of frustrating throughout this whole episode. They never tell us who that guy was, and they kind of allude to the fact that they're going in for surgery and they're still alive, but for some reason they never tell us. I can only assume that there's a reason for this in future episodes, but I guess we'll see. Liz asks how soon they can talk to him, and she's told not today because he's in an induced coma. Liz meets with the science teacher, Bryce, to ask what's being researched out at Salal. Bryce says they were a sort of reclusive group of madmen that have spent decades researching an extinct microorganism that could potentially cure a range of cancers and other autoimmune diseases. Bryce goes on to say the fact is, the permafrost is too hard and damages the microorganism, so it was never going to work anyway. Navarro meets with Rose, and we learn that Travis was a love interest of Rose's who ended his own life after a battle with leukemia. And the more we learn about Travis, the more I'm convinced that this is actually Rust Cole's father. Okay, so I'm a goober because obviously this is Rust Cole's father because Rose said one last gift from Travis Cole, so yeah, mystery solved. Moving on. By the sound of it, Travis drowned himself and was discovered by Navarro, which makes me believe the dance he was doing in episode 1 was in fact more of a reenactment of him drowning. Navarro asks Rose when she started seeing the dead, and she said it started with Travis, but that people in Ennis see dead people all the time. Rose goes on to say the world is getting old and Ennis is where the fabric of all things is coming apart at the seams. Navarro asks how Rose deals with seeing dead people, and Rose says the thing about the dead is that some visit because they miss you, and some because they need to tell you something, and some because they want to take you with them, and that you need to know the difference. Navarro explains the situation with her sister seeing things and that their dead mother is calling her, and Rose says not to confuse the spirit world with mental health issues and that it sounds like Julia needs treatment. As Navarro's leaving, Rose asks her about the spiral on one of the scientists' foreheads. Navarro says she's seen it before years ago and asks Rose what it is. Rose just says, it's old. Older than Ennis, probably even older than the ice. Of course, this same symbol can be seen throughout season 1 as well. Liz returns to the station to find Captain Connolly, who says he'll have the case moved to Anchorage. Liz says the case stays with her and cites a manual about how to deal with frozen bodies while they thaw, essentially giving herself 48 hours to make progress. When Connolly asks where Liz will put the bodies, we cut to the local hockey rink where Liz meets with a woman named Kate, who I assume is the same person Liz mentioned in the last episode named Kate McKittrick, that Navarro had some history with. Liz asks to use the rink since the mine owns it, and Kate reluctantly approves. The Corpsicles move to the rink, and Peter points out that the men appear to have been biting their own hands off. Then we watch as Liz and Peter identify 4 of the men, and Peter says the rest are still buried, which will come into play at the end of the episode. Peter then uses Melina's face to unlock his phone, and he and Liz look through his photos, eventually finding the video of Clark's episode just before all the men went missing. Peter also says they found a handprint on one of the men's shoes, but that they didn't come up with any matches. Liz then tells Peter to start asking questions, and they run through things like why did they leave in the first place, when was the spiral drawn on the man's head, why did they run outside without shoes on, and why are the men's clothes folded. Later, Navarro stops by Eddie's diner to ask Ryan if he knew Raymond Clark, which he didn't, but as they're talking, a man named Chuck comes out and seems to recognize Clark, but then denies it when Navarro asks him about it. Back inside, a fight breaks out between the miners and the other locals, and one of them says something about the kids drinking the same water. And later that night, Navarro and Eddie talk about how bad the water situation is getting as well. Okay, this is only episode 2, and I've already lost count at the amount of times they've referenced the water supply and how it's gone bad. It certainly seems like something might be wrong with the water, like it's poisoned in some way and causing all of the townspeople to go crazy. But then again, they just keep talking about the water and it almost feels too obvious, like it might be some kind of misdirection. Can't be too sure yet either way, and we will talk about this more a little bit later. Liz and Peter interview the Salal cleaning staff and the delivery driver. The cleaners say the workers never spoke to them and that Clark had a history of weird behavior, but that the others mostly just ignored it. The driver told Peter he thought he saw someone out there, but then walks it back and says, this is Ennis, you see people sometimes. The cleaners say they never saw the spiral, but the driver said Clark had it tattooed on his chest. Next, we follow Navarro as she's on her way to find Chuck Mosley in the mining barracks. During her drive, she reaches down in her car and finds a necklace that belonged to her mother, and we see a flashback of her as a young kid watching her mom having some kind of episode, causing Navarro to nearly crash her truck, and she throws the necklace out the window. She makes it to Chuck's place and learns that Clark had bought a trailer named the Golden Eagle off of his cousin 7 years ago. We cut to Hank sending messages to his Russian girlfriend, and when she asks for more pictures of him, he begins walking around his house and discovers that Peter had stolen Annie's files from his house. We then see Peter and Liz discussing Raymond Clark, and they talk about his tattoo and the fact that nobody in his family had seen or heard from him in years. They get onto the subject of who funds the research station, and Peter says after following the money trail, it all leads to a company called Tuttle United, who seems to have their hands in everything from tech to palm oil to cruise lines. Tuttle, as you may remember, was the name of the cult family led by Reverend Billy Lee Tuttle in True Detective Season 1. The Tuttle Foundation, a community nonprofit wing of the Tuttle Church, contributed to the Wellspring program, which funded several schools throughout Louisiana. Now, I doubt we're talking about the same Tuttles here, and it's more likely that this is just another nod to Season 1. Peter asks Liz what happened between her and Navarro, and she brushes it off and just tells him not to mess things up as she sends him back to the hockey rink to keep an eye on the Corpsicle. Liz arrives at Peter's house to pick up Leah, who I guess was probably babysitting, and gets into it with Kayla about making Peter work so much. Liz then walks in on Kayla's grandmother putting tribal markings on Leah's face and freaks out about it. She tells Leah to go wash it off and calls the old lady a laundromat grandma.
Sick burn.
That night, Leah sneaks out to meet up with her girlfriend, and while she's away, Liz sets up a Christmas tree and has flashbacks of what appears to be a son of hers, or some other young boy that we don't know about. Also during the scene, we can hear Twist and Shout being played, which explains her desire to turn it off at the research station in episode 1. Back at the hockey rink, Hank swings by and smacks Peter in the face for stealing from his house, and he goes on to say that Peter needs to get his priorities straight and choose his family over Danvers. Liz pays a visit to Captain Connolly, and they catch up after apparently having been apart for a while. Then they discuss the case a bit, and Liz seems to convince Connolly to let her keep it, at least for now, and heads to the office to look over Clark's credit history. She calls a tattoo artist about the spiral tattoo on his chest and asks if he ever explained what it meant. The artist says he didn't, but she did send a picture over of him with the tattoo and also one of the model for the work, which was Annie K. After seeing this, Liz heads to Navarro's to share what she learned about the tattoo and also says the DNA results came in on the tongue and it was, in fact, Annie's. Liz offers to work with Navarro on it, and Navarro says something like, listen, the Wheeler thing was... I couldn't quite figure out if she said Wheeler or Wagner something, but anyway, she's alluding to something that Liz obviously knows about, and Liz cuts her off and tells her they're just going to close the case and part ways. So yeah, I'm not sure what Navarro's bringing up here. It's evidently something that her and Liz had done together in the past, probably resulting in the bad blood between them. I'm sure we'll learn more about it in later episodes. Leah swings by to visit Peter, and they talk about their parents. Leah tells a story of Liz and her father about how they used to dance and smoke together, giving us a bit more insight into into Liz's life before the events of the show. Navarro pays Eddie a visit where they talk about Annie's case, and she's upset that she never knew about the relationship with Clark when she asks how she could have never known. Navarro connects the dots that the trailer that Clark had bought from Chuck's cousin is where they must have gone to keep their relationship a secret, and she leaves when she realizes the trailer is probably hidden in a place called the Nook. We cut to Liz digging into Clark's notes and finds several disturbing pages where Clark had scribbled things like, "Oh God, never say her name. I can hear her, feel her. I can hear her moving, her fingers cold. Always remember, never say her name, never sleep, and I can feel her moving outside." So this dude was definitely tripping long before the events of episode 1, and I'll talk theories on this later. Liz gets a call from Navarro to come down to the Nook to see Clark's trailer, and we see some weird stuff, from bones on the table to voodoo-looking dolls hanging from the ceiling to this. I don't even know what this is. Some kind of shrine or something for Annie. It definitely looks to me like Clark was attempting to bring her back to life using some kind of magic or ritual or something. Liz and Navarro are called down to the hockey rink where Peter says that there are only 6 men and that someone is missing. Liz goes around and names everyone there, and there are actually 2 men missing, Anders Lund and Raymond Clark, and they just say, "Clark isn't here, he's out there, he's alive," as the episode ends. So yeah, this is the proof I was talking about back at the beginning of my video that Anders is the one that's still alive. I don't know why we had to do this little detective work in this episode to figure that out. I don't know why they couldn't have just said, "Hey, Anders is alive at the hospital getting surgery." Maybe this will be revealed to us later. But there you go, I did the work for you. Also, throughout this episode, I noticed on the scoreboard at the hockey rink, it shows player 9 had a penalty with 53 seconds left, with a score of 5-3. I figured with it being there multiple times, maybe the showrunners are hinting at something, so I went back to the 53-second mark of this episode, and it was the moment Liz finds the spiral on one of the men's foreheads. Not sure there's really anything there, so I also went and looked at the 9-minute and 53-second mark, and it was just after Rose said you need to know the difference between all the reasons the dead come to visit. So after all my detective work, I can confidently say I don't know if the 953 means anything at all. Honestly, I thought I was gonna find something super cool and revealing, but maybe they were just numbers on the scoreboard. What do you all think? Does 953 have any significance? Does it mean anything? Let me know. As for what's going on, I keep going back to the whole water situation, and I think that it's probably causing the collective community to lose their minds and hallucinate all at the same time. And if this is the case, it does explain away most of the supernatural elements of the show. I say most because it really only explains away the visions that people are having. It doesn't explain the lights flickering, the radios and phones malfunctioning, and the polar bear. That is, unless we are being shown and hearing things through the characters' experiences. Still though, that doesn't explain to me why all of the men at the research station would have run out of the place and died together, unless Clark just was threatening to kill them all, so they all ran out there. I don't know. Basically what I'm saying is I'm teetering still on the fence between, is this actually going to have a supernatural element, or will they be able to explain it all away through something like they're all poisoned through the water? In relation to Anders Lund still being alive and going in for surgery, I first of all find it hard to believe that he's still alive. I thought for sure anybody who's laying there naked for 48 hours in those conditions was definitely going to be dead, so that was interesting. But anyway, I suspect we'll hear from him in a future episode. It sounds like they're going to be going and interviewing him, so I'm very interested to see what we learn from that conversation. Overall, I think we got another solid episode here, and I'm very excited and interested to see where things are going in future episodes. Let me know your thoughts on this episode, and of course, your theories down in the comments. Thanks for watching. See you next time.